Okay, hello. This is the fourth lecture in a series on exchange theory, and today's lecture is going to have a very narrow focus. We're only going to focus on the U.S. and British combined effort to overthrow the Iranian government and install a dictator. Right, so this is the actual cover page for the declassified document that's going to be the primary source. It is written by a guy named Dr. Wilbur, who was the chief planner for this coup. Okay, and it's called Overthrow of Premier Mossadegh of Iran. Mossadegh was the prime minister of Iran, and they installed a dictator. Okay, so let's do a quick review of what we did yesterday. All right, we uh, briefly introduced the history of the oil industry, and we talked about petroleum when it comes out of the ground as crude oil, as being a mixture of all sorts of hydrocarbons, and it varies from source of oil, the content within it, but in all cases, it's a mixture of shorter chain hydrocarbons and longer chain hydrocarbons, and even very much longer. Right. Now, the first method of separating out the different molecular sizes, it's called fractional distillation, right? Separating them out based upon the fact that if they're different molecular sizes, which that means they have different molecular attraction to the molecules themselves, so that allows for different boiling points, and you boil them off at different temperatures, and you separate them out that way, or you condense them at different temperatures. All right, and then we said that shortly after that there was the first invention of an internal combustion engine. Now you got a use for oil other than lamps, right? Other than lighting, and then you development of vehicles, first automobile, and then use of oil products in other vehicles like submarines, airplanes, and ships, right? Then used for synthetic materials, first plastics. And by 1911, there was a realization that oil is going to be the foundation of world power. The strategic value of oil, based in naval ships and commercial ships. The advantages oil gave for them. Yeah, we went through that. All right, and then World War One comes along. That was a first big use of oil, right? All sorts of different vehicles being invented and used, and by the end of World War One, there was fears within the government, U.S. government, that U.S. oil is going to be depleted, based out of only Pennsylvania. However, those fears were allayed when there were big discoveries of oil in Texas, Oklahoma, California. All right. And about the same time, the first nationalization of oil. Oil was developed by a handful of Western companies, and then the country started taking it back for their own, saying, "This is our oil now." First the Soviets and Mexico. Then World War II comes along. We're swimming in oil, but then World War II comes along with, again, high consumption of oil and increased use of oil for transportation, uh, whether for business or for private use. And so FDR in 1945 makes a deal with the Saudi royal family, says, "Hey, we'll keep you in power. We'll protect you, make sure you stay in power so long as you assure us a reliable source of oil." All right. Okay, so we're going to need Middle East oil. That's the key thing there, and that's a start or a big U.S. involvement in the Middle East. All right. Then shortly after that, about 6 years later, the Prime Minister of Iran, this guy here, Mossadegh, he pushes a bill through their parliament, and they sign off on it to nationalize Anglo-Iranian oil. That's British Oil Company. Today it's BP, right? So they're going to nationalize their oil, and then we overthrew their government 2 years later. Installed a dictator. Okay, so we'll focus on that today. We said the reason why that was so significant is not just because of Iran itself, right? But the fact that if you allow that to happen uncontested, then throughout the world, all the other colonized, nations, not just in oil, but whatever resource, a Western nation is over there dominating. Well, they're gonna say, well, screw you. We're gonna take our resource back, right? They're gonna nationalize their resource, and then it's gonna be a jailbreak. It's gonna be a wave of them, and you can't stop it, right? You know, so I say the real threat was every other colonial dominated country following Iran's example, and not just in oil. It could be anything, gold, diamonds, you know, precious, any other metals, agriculture even. We'll talk about a case today, one of the bananas, right? And that involves John Foster Dulles and his Sullivan Cromwell law firm, which was a neo-colonial empire builder, right? And they gained control of power. Okay, so the real threat was an independence nationalization jailbreak, just like the Spanish colonies in the Americas in 1810, right? Think back to the War of 1812. This revolution throughout the Spanish colonies was one of the things that gave us an opportunity to go and try to attack Canada. Our back was secure because Spain was preoccupied trying to put out fires throughout all its colonies, right? So how this came about was during the Napoleonic Wars in 1807. Napoleon turned towards Spain, invaded Spain, right? It's called the Peninsular War. And with Spain getting its butt whooped by Napoleon, Spain's American colony said, well, "What the hell? Let's all go independent." So there was a jailbreak in 1810, roughly. They all did about the same time. And from Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama was part of it, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, Chile. They all broke, right? And, it's a tidal wave. You can't stop it. So you let one go uncontested, then that encourages all the rest to go independent and nationalize their resources. Then it's out of control. And that's why, for example, after World War II, with the colonial empires involved in a life or death struggle during World War II, they were preoccupied. And so their colonies enjoyed a modicum of independence, right? So after the war, Britain and France and the other colonial, nations moved to reestablish their colonial control. And the first test case was Vietnam, right? So the British helped the French to reestablish colonial control in Vietnam, which created that problem, and then we ended up fighting that junk. All right, so let's see. Yeah, let's move on to how the CIA and British overthrew the Iranian government. All right, so in 1953. Oh, by the way, this is a little bit more detail on the Iran coup from the declassified CIA official history of what they called Operation TP Ajax. That's the mission to overthrow the Iranian government, right? And the official history was written by Dr. Wilbur, who was tasked to be the chief planner. You'll see it's documented here. The chief planner for the coup. You see how this is done, how they overthrow a government. So in 1953, the overthrow of the Iranian democracy was a joint British MI6 SIS and US CIA operation. British involvement in Iran began in the 16th century with the ruling Safavid dynasty, right? So it goes basically British involvement in Iran goes way back, right? However, it was with the Qajar dynasty, all right, that ruled between 1785 to 1925, that Britain obtained most of its concessions, right? These Shahs were a Turkic tribe from the Caspian Sea area. Their corrupt, small-minded, self-serving rule was largely responsible for Iran's poverty and backwardness. I mean, Iran was poor as hell, that, and it's largely due to these scumbags, right? Um, with their concessions, they would be responsible for Britain's plunder of Iranian national resources. And you'll see to the vast extent, Britain controlled every damn thing in Iran. Uh, Britain followed the classic neo-colonial playbook. I mean, this goes back centuries, right? And made alliance with the ruling monarchs or dictators, propping them up. Sometimes they totally put guys in power, right? Propping them up, guaranteeing their protection, and then addicting them to wealth and opulent lifestyles, right? Since the Shahs produced nothing themselves, they paid for their lavish spending by selling off the nation's resources in concession contracts, right? By this means, Britain obtained possession of Iran's oil, industries, farm irrigation, minerals, railroads, streetcars, that's telegraph, national bank, currency printing. Britain printed Iranian money, right? That's a big money maker. If you can make money, that's a big money maker. Custom houses, they control their taxes, right? Duties, tariff, taxes, control tax revenues, obtain tax exemptions for their imports, and that allowed the Great Britain to flood Iran with British imports, especially things like textiles, which destroyed local manufacturers and merchants, as well as the overall economy. It destroyed productivity within that country, right? Okay, so I say here all about the kitchen sink. I mean, just look at this list, right? All the key industries, all the key resources, transportation, communication, currency, money, you know, it's all taken over by Britain. They control the whole damn country. And when the Shahs ran out of national resources to sell, then they took big loans from Britain on national debt on the backs of their people, giving Britain further leverage. All right. So this is classic colonial or neo-colonial method for obtaining control over another nation's entire economy. This is the old playbook, allowing for the maximum extraction of wealth out of the country to the detriment of the indigenous people. It was entirely undemocratic. In fact, it depended on being undemocratic because if the people ruled, they wouldn't stand for it, right? They wouldn't allow it. So you got to have a dictator in power. You can't have a democracy, right? I mean, that's why we're installing dictators. You know, we're saying, oh, we're installing dictators to fight communism. Oh yeah, right? Or is that fueling communism? British maximum extraction of wealth out of Iran caused grueling poverty, blocked development, created economic dependency upon Great Britain. These sufferings and humiliations caused by the Shah's self-serving greed, fueled resentment, nationalism, thirst for independence from foreign domination, and drive for democracy to break the Shah's grip on arbitrary, autocratic self-rule. All right. Okay, you can see that, right? That happens. Just think of it. Just think of it as, most people are proud Americans, right? If some foreign nation came over to our country, dominated our economy, took control of all our resources, right? Threw everyone into desperate poverty, well, you'd be pissed, right? And you'd become nationalistic. You'd rally together. You'd wave the flag, right? You'd like, let's go kick these guys out. Well, that's what they're doing, right? All right, so the rise of Iranian democracy. Yeah, so now they want democracy. They want to limit the Shah's power, right? Because they're screwing the whole country over. No representation, just for their advantage. Screw the rest of the country over, right? So rise of Iranian democracy in 1906. This is the first step of Iran towards democracy. They had a revolution called the Iranian Constitutional Revolution, with which they established a parliament, which is a legislative body, representative body. And according to the Constitution, the parliament elected the prime minister. So jumping way ahead, about 50 years, Mossadegh was elected prime minister by the Iranian parliament. Okay. uh, according to the Constitution. Now, here's the background on Mossadegh, right? Uh, the dude was fiercely democratic, opposed the self-serving, arbitrary, dictatorial rule of the Shahs. He was also fiercely nationalistic, wanting freedom from foreign control over their politics, resources, and economy. Right? Britain controlled everything: politics, resources, economy. They had all sorts of agents within Iran, bribing politicians, influencing politicians. Um, Nationalize. He wanted to nationalize Iranian oil. That's a big sticking point for the U.S. and British. And he had some good social reforms. The guy was a progressive dude, right? He freed indentured peasants. No slavery, right? This is freeing the slaves. Um, Taxed 20% of landlord rents to finance pest control, right? Trying to improve their living conditions and develop rural housing, supported women's rights, defended freedom of religion. This is important to know because he's going to be accused of being a communist and attacking Islam, right? When it was not true. He was a defender of religion, ensured freedom in courts and university, established a system of unemployment compensation, ordered factory owners to pay sick and injured benefits to workers. He had a reputation for integrity and self-sacrifice. That was documented in at least 9 separate instances, including rejecting personal gain. The guy was incorruptible. Even salary, he wouldn't get paid. So he was a true public servant. Fighting corruption, loyalty to the Constitution, even to his political disadvantage. Right? I mean, this is the type of guy you want. You know, I like FDR because I think he had a good heart, right? I mean, there's other presidents who are totally self-serving, right? And that is a problem. That is a threat, right? His commitment to the people of Iran and not to the rich ruling class from which he came, right? So he's similar to FDR, came from an elite, you know, class, but he was for the people, right? His fervent commitment to democracy and anti-communist, anti-dictatorship stance. So here's his goals: one, democracy; two, rule of law; constitutional government; eliminate corruption in government; public service and social reforms to better the lives of the Iranian people; right? Freedom from foreign control, right? So he was nationalistic. Take back our economy for ourselves. Take back our resources for ourselves. All right. So the CIA and Britain took actions to overthrow the Iranian democracy and install a dictator after Iran nationalized its oil in 1951. All right. The first thing they did was wage economic warfare. I mean, that's key. If you want to overthrow a government, you want to get the people pissed off at the government. And the best way to get the people pissed off at the government is to destroy the economy. If the economy's bad, right, who do people point the finger to? The people in power, right? So just like, you have a president, right, and he's in his first term, going into the second election, right? The president always has the advantage of being an incumbent, right? Usually, when the incumbent does not get reelected, it's because the economy is bad. If the economy is bad, people turn against the president, right? They want someone else. That's a key thing for people, the economy, whether or not they can have jobs. They care about morality or war, less so, right? Comes down to making a living, right? I mean, that's understandable, but at the same time, it's just materialistic. All right, so wage economic warfare, destroy Iran's economy to destabilize the country and turn the population against Mossadegh, right? I gave you the example of the president. Chances of the president getting reelected go way down when the economy is bad. Um, Destroy Iran's oil industry. That's the key way of doing it. So what they did is, after Iran nationalized its oil and the British were pulling out, they're forced to get out, they sabotage oil production and refining facilities, destroying equipment, right? And then they ordered all British technicians out of Iran, right? Anyone who's got technical skills. And then Iran tried to get its own technicians by posting ads. Iran didn't have the people with the skills to run the, they didn't know what the hell's going on here. You can't learn overnight, right? So they posted ads throughout the world to recruit oil industry technicians. But then the Britain and U.S. used diplomatic pressure on multiple nations to prevent oil technicians from receiving visas to Iran, right? So that's part of that economic warfare. Destroyed Iran's access to oil export markets. So Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the British oil company now known as BP, threatened retaliatory action to anyone who purchased Iranian oil. Britain and U.S. prevented U.S. ships from carrying Iranian oil. Britain imposed a naval blockade, seizing ships carrying Iranian oil. One case was Rosemary, was a ship carrying Iranian oil that was already, I guess, it was already refined and processed, right? Um, before the nationalization of the oil. Britain got the Truman administration to block deals between U.S. oil companies and Iran. Right, so they're getting no help. Right, it's killing their oil industry. Oil industry is their main source of revenues. Um, Britain got the Truman administration to prevent U.S. financial aid to Iran. Britain imposed economic sanctions on Iran. Britain froze Iranian assets in Great Britain, including bank accounts. I mean, that's a key asset, it's money. Um, the U.S. and Britain waged economic warfare to devastate Iran's economy, then claimed that the devastation will cause Iran to fall to the Soviets. Then said, "Oh, we got to have a coup." Well, does that make sense, right? Well, here this is from Dr. Wilbur's document, page Appendix B. Right, the policy of both the U.S. and U.K. governments requires replacement of Mossadegh as the alternative to certain economic collapse in Iran and eventual loss of the area to the Soviet orbit. All right. So they're blaming Mossadegh for economic collapse, but really the key cause of economic collapse was economic warfare. You destroy their oil industry, prevent them from selling any oil, block that in all ways, you're going to kill the economy, right? So that is so contradictory, right? You're saying, oh, the economic devastation over there is going to throw Iran into the Soviet camp, all right? So we better overthrow Mossadegh. Wait a minute. You're the ones destroying the economy, so you're the ones pushing them towards the Soviet, if that's what you believe, right? So this is totally irrational, illogical. This is a cover story, right? So does this make sense? The U.S. British claim that Iran's economic devastation will cause them to fall into the Soviets, but it is the U.S. and British who destroy the economy. All right. So British and U.S. undermined the government in Iran and conducted a destabilization program. Dr. Wilbur is selected to plan the coup Operation TP Ajax. And this is a quote from Dr. Wilbur's document about himself. Near the end of April 53, Dr. Donald Wilbur, covert consultant to NEA, was selected by the division to go to Nicosia and, in close collaboration with SIS British, draw up a plan for the overthrow of Mossadegh. So he's just stating it outright. Yeah, I'm there to overthrow Mossadegh. And he's a chief planner. He wrote this history. Okay? So this is coming from the horse's mouth. If anyone wants to try to that's bullshit. Dr. Wilbur was the lead U.S. planner of the coup, talking about himself here, and he's writing the history. So one, meet with opposition leaders, suggest ways of subverting Mossadegh government. All right, I forgot. This is the only time I forgot the page number. Propaganda, subversive campaign against Mossadegh's government included these elements. Create, quote, a massive campaign. Oh, by the way, anything read is a direct quote. A massive campaign against Mossadegh and his government, but with Mossadegh himself as a principal target. It's page 15. Bombard the masses with, quote, articles, broadsheets, and pamphlets, some pro-Shah, some anti-Mossadegh. The material designed to discredit Mossadegh will hammer the following themes. All this is preliminary background stuff to try to initiate the wave. The main thing is the economy, right? Propaganda will hammer, quote, Mossadegh favors a Tudor party and the USSR. This will be supported by black documents. Black documents mean manufactured false documents, right? So the Tudor Party are the Communist Party in Iran, right? Aligned with, of course, the Soviet Union is communist, right? They're trying to paint them as being a communist. Quote, at the same time as 2B above, the fullest publicity will be given to U.S. station fabricated documents which prove and record in detail a secret agreement between Mossadegh and the Tudor, with the latter promising to use their force to support Mossadegh and against the religious leaders, army, and the police. Okay, so let's take a look at this, right? So you're going to give fullest publicity to U.S. manufactured false documents. U.S. is making up this shit, right? To prove, right? Which is funny. We're going to make false stuff to prove, right? And record in detail secret agreement between Mossadegh and the communists, right? You're linking them to the communists, with the communists promising to use force, use all their force in support of Mossadegh and against religious leaders, army, and police. Now, who are the key groups within Iran other than the government, right? Religious leaders were big. Army, police. These are the key groups. Now you're setting them in opposition against Mossadegh, connecting him with the communists who they hate, especially the religious leaders. Why do the religious leaders hate communists? Well, because communism is atheistic, right? That's a fundamental tenet of Marx. That's the main reason why I'm anti-communist, right? Because they are atheistic. Marx said, religion or Christianity is the opiate of the masses, right? It's just to dull your pain, make you feel good in your suffering, right? That's a bunch of crap, but that's what he said. Anyway, but so these guys can be dead against communists. So army, police, they're dead against the communists. He's trying to set these guys against Mossadegh with manufactured false documents, black documents. All right, propaganda will hammer Mossadegh. It is deliberately fostering the growth of regional separatist elements through his removal of army control over tribal areas. All right, he's trying to create separation within the country. He's trying to split our country. All right. And to make it easier for the Soviets to take over. I mean, this is such a load of crap because Mossadegh was highly nationalistic. All right. So he's trying to carve up our country to make it easy for the Soviets to gobble them up. All right. That's going to build fear. This is fear mongering. Classic fear mongering. All right. Manufacture the belief that Mossadegh is assisting the Soviets in taking over Iran. Propaganda will hammer. Mossadegh is deliberately leading the country into economic collapse. Well, who is the main source of economic collapse? U.S. and Britain, destroying the oil industry. Manufacture the belief that Mossadegh was responsible for economic ruin, really due to British and U.S. economic warfare, and that he did it intentionally. Now, one of the means of doing this was, you'll see, the CIA printed counterfeit currency to undermine the economy, and then blamed that on Mossadegh. In fact, I'll show you the actual. There's a few of these that I'm going to show you the actual. This comes from the actual document. Photo, copy and pasted it, right? Here. Ground two, that Mossadegh is leading the country into complete economic collapse through his unsympathetic dictatorship. Just prior to movement, CIA would give widest publicity to the evidence of illegally issued paper money. CIA might have capability to print masses, excellent imitation currency, counterfeit, which would be overprinted by this message. So who's going to print the counterfeit? The CIA. And who are they going to blame? Mossadegh, right? Oh, see, that's destroying the economy. Well, who's destroying the economy, right? The British and U.S. All right. So at this same time, the psychological campaign against Mossadegh was reaching its climax. The controllable press was going all out against Mossadegh. All right, that's a historical quote from Wilbur, page 36. Pay off the Iranian press, according to CIA propagandist Richard Kadam. 4/5 of Tehran press was under CIA control. Kadam went further. Any article would skip this. All right. Though through manufactured fake documents, propaganda will hammer that Mossadegh favors the Tudeh party and the USSR. I showed you that above. How they're going to, CIA is going to fabricate false documents. This will be supported by black documents. And Mossadegh is an enemy of Islam since he associates with Tudeh and advances their aims. Right? That's a communist party, right? Who's atheistic, against any religion. All right. So incite religious opposition, who is powerful in Iran, proven by manufactured false documents. So they say we're going to prove it with crap that we make up. CIA would manufacture fake documents proving a secret agreement between Mossadegh and Tudeh. That's stated again. Create fear in religious leaders, army, and police by manufacturing false evidence that Mossadegh poses a threat. CIA agents pretending to be Tudeh would make threatening phone calls to religious leaders, promising savage punishment if they do not support Mossadegh. Then they start bombing their homes. This is CIA agents, right? Pretending to be Tudeh, right? Pretending that they're doing this in support of Mossadegh, tying these attacks to Mossadegh, right? You see how they're building up opposition and hate for Mossadegh, setting him up to be overthrown. All right. Now you pay off opposition leaders and finance opposition forces. The study indicated that a Shah General Zahedi combination, supported by the CIA, local assets, and financial backing, would have a good chance of overthrowing Mossadegh, particularly in this combination, should be able to get the largest mobs in the street, and if a sizable portion of Tehran garrison refused to carry out Mossadegh order. All right, so you can overthrow him. That's the assessment. All right, so they're talking about financial backing here. So financial backing is down here. All right, so CIA authorized $1 million to support Zahedi. That's Wilbur, 18. And then $1 million a week will be spent in purchasing cooperation of members of the Maliji. This is the parliament. So they're buying off the parliament. Okay, when they say purchasing cooperation, right? That's bribery. Come on, that's payoff, man. Euphemistic for bribery. That's Wilbur again. Call for direct action, riots, start mobs in the street, right? Create turmoil, threat, hate, anger, fear, all directed at Mossadegh. The actions and propaganda campaign to set up the coup will be timed to within a week or two before the coup for maximum cognitive effect and to give Mossadegh no time to disprove the charges. All right, quote, this will begin only a week or two before the climax of Situation A. Situation A is direct attacks upon religious leaders by the CIA. The CIA bombed these dudes, right? And then blame it on Mossadegh. So as not to offer too much time for a sharp reaction by Mossadegh. You don't give him time to react. Don't give him time to say, "Hey, it wasn't me," and prove it, and so that the impact will not be dispersed, but by being long drawn out. All right, this is timing. This is one of the reasons why you do timing, right? You want to maximize the effect, because if you wait too long, it's going to fade. People tend to forget, right? The psychological fear impact diminishes. Public opinion will be fanned to fever pitch by Mossadegh in the period just preceding the execution of the overthrow operation. Why? Because the CIA is attacking people, bombing them, blowing them up, and blaming Mossadegh. This is all time method. CIA agents pretending to be Tuda threaten religious leaders with savage punishment if they oppose Mossadegh, then bomb their homes. Right, that's page 37, Wilbur. This will be designed to connect Tuda with Mossadegh and incite hatred for him. Right, so that's setting him up for the coup. Immediately before the coup, the CIA orchestrated attack upon prominent religious leaders with other prominent religious leaders standing by to point the blame at Mossadegh. Then they orchestrated mass refugee shelter in sanctuaries, right? Mosques, telegraphs, post offices, banks, to accentuate the fear and threat of Mossadegh, right? All these people panicking, huddling together in sanctuaries, right? Right? That just accentuates the fear. Forced the Shah to go along with the coup. From the very beginning, it had been recognized that the Shah must be forced to play a specific role. However reluctant he may prove to be, in the presence of this increasingly hostile and abnormal atmosphere, Zahedi will take over as chief of staff and make those arrests, which are essential part of military phase of the coup. Make the coup appear legal and quasi-legal instead of outright coup. Make it appear legal, right? Right. Okay, so here's some samples directly from Wilbur's document. Would be widely publicized that the refugee movement on basis two grounds popular dissatisfaction with Mossadegh as follows. Ground one, the Mossadegh government basically anti-religious, as most clearly demonstrated by ties with Mossadegh and Tuda and Mossadegh and USSR. Just prior to movement, CIA would give widest publicity to all fabricated documents proving secret agreement between Mossadegh and Tuda. All right, so this is funny, right? The CIA would manufacture false, fabricated documents that prove secret agreement between Tuda and Mossadegh, right? And it's all time, right? Just prior to the movement. Now, ground two, that Mossadegh is leading the country into complete economic collapse through his unsympathetic dictatorship. Just prior to movement, CIA would give widest publicity to evidence of illegally issued paper money. That's counterfeit. CIA might have capability to print mass excellent imitation currency, which would be overprinted by this message. So who's going to print this counterfeit? CIA, right? Who are they going to blame? Mossadegh. When are they going to do it? Timed. Right before the coup, right? And here's the final action. The final action is this is action A. As noted above, the military action can result from situation A, B, C. However, the pre-coup activities of the organization, pre-coup is like all the propaganda, right? You're building it up, right? Saying, hey, he's part of the communists, right? He wants to split the country, all sorts of lying crap, right? All right. So this is what you do right before. On the appointed day, staged attacks will be made against respected religious leaders in Tehran. Who's going to make these attacks? CIA. MI6, British. Other religious will at once say that these attacks, so these guys are set up, right, to say at once that these attacks were ordered by Mossadegh as his reaction to disfavor in which his government is held by the religious leaders of the country, right? A number of more important leaders will at once take sanctuary in the Mala's grounds. That's that fleeing. That's to accentuate the fear, right? All these panic guys herding like panic cattle, right, into shelter. All right, so now I'm going to do a summary. Let me organize a summary. I'm going to take a break here. Okay, we're back. So Dr. Wilbur's document, the official CIA history of how the CIA and MI6 overthrew the Iranian democracy. That document is a cookbook on how to conduct a coup. And the main idea is to overthrow Mossadegh. The CIA had to first turn the people of Iran against Mossadegh, especially key groups like religious leaders, army, and police, right? So they portrayed Mossadegh as one, a threat to the economy, two, a threat to the nation, a traitor who would sell out the country to the Soviets so they can take over, a threat to religious freedom, a physical threat to their lives, a threat to social order, a CIA incited mobs and riots, a murderer who kills with assassination bombings, right? All of this is classic fear mongering, and fear mongering always works. Why? Because it's powerful. It is the survival instinct is one of our strongest driving forces, right? And it overcomes logic and reason. All right. So and knowledge. So this is a list of things they did. The CIA did. CIA actions: destroy the economy through economic warfare. The naval blockade and destroy the main thing was to destroy the oil industry, the chief source of revenue for the country. Blame it on Mossadegh. CIA prints counterfeit money to destroy the economy and then blames it on Mossadegh. Right? They print this stuff up. Right? CIA passes this propaganda. Mossadegh, quote, Mossadegh is deliberately leading the country into economic collapse. Deliberately. Oh yeah, I want to destroy the economy. Yeah. Justify overthrow Mossadegh because economic devastation will throw Iran into the Soviet camp. Well, who's destroying the economy? The CIA and the MI6. The US and the British are. Right? Oh, we got to overthrow them because that's going to lead them to the communists. Well, who's destroying the economy? Justify overthrow of Mossadegh because economic debt. Oh, I just read. Create a massive propaganda campaign by buying off the quote controllable press. Time the controllable press to go all out against Mossadegh. That's a quote. Manufacture fake documents that prove Mossadegh is in league with the communists and the USSR, and give widest publicity to the CIA created fake documents. Use the fabricated connection between Mossadegh and communists to prove that he is anti-religious and, quote, an enemy of Islam. Manufacture and propagate the lie that Mossadegh is fostering a separatist groups inside Iran to weaken Iran for easy takeover by the Soviets. He was nationalist. He was patriotic. Bribe parliamentary ministers, CIA agents pretend to be true communists, and then call key religious army and police and threaten them with violence if they do not support Mossadegh. Right? Incite riots in the streets. Right? Mossadegh can't keep the social order here. He's causing problems. CIA makes phone calls threatening to bomb homes of key religious leaders. Then they bomb them, all timed, and have other religious leaders standing by to immediately point the finger at Mossadegh. This is time for maximum psychological impact. Then launch the coup. So this is all setting up Mossadegh to be hated. Then you launch a coup, and no one minds. Right? See, you build hate for the guy, and then you overthrow him. Make the coup, quote, appear legal or quasi-legal instead of an outright coup. Man, a bunch of liars. Okay, so in reality, Mossadegh was the opposite of the way he was portrayed by the CIA. He was fiercely democratic and nationalistic. He wanted freedom from foreign control. He didn't want the Soviets to take. He wanted damn foreigners out so they control their country. He was anti-communist and anti-dictatorship. He was for freedom of religion and not communist threat to religion. On multiple occasions, he sacrificed himself for the people. He championed democracy, rule of law, constitutional government, elimination of government corruption. He led a life of public service and enacted many social reforms to better the lives of his fellow citizens. He had a fervent commitment to democracy and was anti-communist and anti-dictatorship. And he's portrayed as the opposite. Effectively, it worked, right? And he's overthrown. And they installed the Shah, a dictator, right? So what I want to do next is I want to, I guess I'll go straight to this. Show you another coup that the two main perpetrators of this coup are two brothers, John Foster Dulles, who was Secretary of State, and his brother Allen Dulles, who was director of the CIA, top CIA dude, right? They conducted both of these coups here. Mossadegh overthrown. Then a year later, they had this guy overthrown, Arbenz. Both of these guys were solid dudes, man, right? Both of them were, you know, sacrificing for the people. Arbenz risked his life twice to bring democracy to Guatemala and to save democracy in Guatemala. Right. Right. So both of these guys. This is Arbenz. He was the leader, democratically elected president of Guatemala. You know, high popularity. He brought democracy to Guatemala. Right. And Mossadegh. Okay, both were democratic, free market capitalists with moderate reforms. They were sacrificing heroes, both of them. However, both threatened economic independence from Western corporate control. All right, especially nationalization of the resources. But you know what? Arbenz wasn't going to nationalize resources. He was going to redistribute unused land possessed by United Fruit, much of which was acquired by negotiated concessions between John Foster Dulles, his corporation, and a dictator, Ubico. Right? Both were accused of being communists to justify their overthrow by the U.S. Mossadegh was painted a communist with CIA manufactured documents. Arbenz was painted a communist. Well, he did associate with a few communists who shared his views on land reform, but those views on land, their land reform program was totally private ownership and capitalistic and not communist. All right. So Arbenz was the main accusation of communism of Arbenz was manufactured by the U.S. So what the U.S. did is the CIA USA started building up a force to overthrow Arbenz in Honduras, right next door. And then they were sending overt threat signals that they were going to do this, made it obvious they're getting ready to overthrow him. And they in fact had a leak. A CIA agent leaked to Arbenz that they're getting ready to overthrow him. So Arbenz, Guatemala was militarily weak. They didn't have much of the military at all. So he sought to buy weapons first from Canada, Germany, and Rhodesia, but this was blocked by the U.S. The U.S. intervened with diplomatic power and blocked the purchase. So now Arbenz is blocked from getting weapons from a Western source, right? So he goes to the East Bloc, the communists, right? He goes and buys Czechoslovakian weapons, not Soviet. He's trying to, no doubt he's trying to go to a fringe. He doesn't want to go directly to the Soviets because he knows they're going to point the finger, but it doesn't matter, right? They use this, hey, that's communist, right? So now the U.S. has an angle. They labeled him a communist, right? And then they had a big wave of fear mongering, all right? They blew. John Foster Dulles blew this out of proportion, and the press followed suit. Right? They said this is the communists getting a foothold inside Latin America. They're going to spread communism throughout Latin America. It's going to creep up to to the United States. It's going to go through Texas, New Mexico. We're going to have communism coming into our country, and they're going to threaten the Panama Canal. That's what they said. Right? He's trying to defend himself against clear U.S. threat, and this is exactly what happened. They used this force to overthrow him. Right? This is a force made by the Americans, equipment provided by the Americans, training by the U.S. Air. They provided planes, right? Air Force trained by U.S. Air Force, right? And they attacked, overthrew his government, right? So let's take a look at who conducted both of these coups, right? Dulles brothers. These guys are serious douchebags. They make me sick. Right. Allen Dulles, director of CIA. John Foster Dulles, second. Yeah, key positions. Power elite. Right. These guys are right here, right in the core of the power elite, right along these dudes, right? These power dudes, right? All right. So who was their uncle? Robert Lansing, right? He was Secretary of State under Wilson. He's a key architect of policies. The one-sided shipment of weapons to the Allies, which got us into World War One. Right? That's the reason why Germany started attacking our subs in 1917. All right. February 1st, they said, okay, we're desperate. We got to go. They're shipping mountains of weapons to our enemies, so we got to attack their ships. All right, and then we're at war. So who was John Foster Dulles? Both of these guys, Allen Dulles was involved in Iranian oil before the overthrow. I forget exactly what he did. I got to go back and look. Anyway, so John Foster Dulles was the sole managing partner of Sullivan Cromwell law firm, which was a neo-colonial empire builder for U.S. multinational corporations going overseas and taking control of some foreign countries' resources and economy, negotiating concessions, deals with dictators, right? An example is United Fruit in Guatemala. And, remember I told you how the British controlled everything, right? Oil, right? Any industries, farm irrigation, minerals, railroads, streetcars, telegraph, national bank, currency, custom house. This is classic neo-colonial playbook, right? Get rid of this. All right, you'll see the same thing is done by United Fruit, right? So, example, United Fruit dominated Guatemalan economy. They own 42% of all land. They own the railroad, electricity, the only port, passenger and freight lines. They control taxes. John Foster Dulles obtained concessions for the above from dictator Umbico, right? He was a dictator before they became a democracy by Arbenz. I forget who the first president was, but Arbenz was a key guy here. All right. Arbenz was the second president. Okay. So Allen Dulles. So look at United Fruit. They control everything in Guatemala. That's classic neo-colonial control of another nation's economy, right? And with that, you have maximum extraction of wealth out of that country, and that leaves them desperately poor. That leaves them totally vulnerable to the foreign corporation, right? That undermines any chance of development within their country. Okay. So look at who's involved with United Fruit. John Foster Dulles obtained the concessions from Umbico. Allen Dulles was on the board of directors of United Fruit. Both of these guys were major shareholders of United Fruit. Beadle Smith was director of the CIA before Allen Dulles. He's then, after leading into the Arbenz coup, he's made director of United Fruit. Okay, Thomas Dudley Cabot, one of the guys related to Henry Cabot Lodge. These guys are same power club, right? He's director of international security at the State Department. He's president of United Fruit. John Morris Cabot, assistant secretary of state for inter-American affairs. Oh, that's perfect for Guatemala. He's a major shareholder of United Fruit. Henry Cabot Lodge Jr. was U.S. ambassador to the UN right before the Vietnam War was cooked up. He was the ambassador to Vietnam, right, prior to the Gulf of Tonkin. Remember I showed you how Henry Cabot Lodge is on record talking about maximum deniability, how we can conduct these attacks. He's one of about a half dozen statements by these guys saying how they can conduct attacks, against the North Vietnamese and have maximum deniability, right? And yet Ho Chi Minh's going to know exactly who it came from, right? Who did it, all right? But we're going to have maximum deniability. No American's going to believe it, right? He's grandson to Henry Cabot Lodge, who was instrumental in starting the Spanish-American War with the congressional resolution being passed. Major shareholder, he's a major shareholder of United Fruit. General Robert Cutler, who was National Security Advisor between 53 to 55, right then during the Guatemala coup and during the Iran coup, right? 57, 58, and he's chairman of the board of United Fruit. I mean, come on, right? You think money's not involved in this? Oh, it's anti-communist. It's about good versus evil. It's about cowboys versus Indians, right? You're right. All right. Americans believe anything. I swear. Well, mostly because they want to believe it. They don't want to believe it. I mean, why do they want to support these guys? These guys are evil, right? They just want to support themselves. Most Americans, they want to pound their chest and say USA, USA. I swear, people are so corrupt. People are so self-serving. It's human nature. It's disgusting, right? I mean, anyways. All right, so let's take a look. Let's review the power lead diagram, right? Here's the Dulles brothers. Here's their uncle, Robert Lansing. He's a key guy in getting us involved in World War One. World War One was the start of the military-industrial complex. Mountains of wealth being made off of warfare, right? Whether it's weapons or any other commodity, I mean, it doesn't have to be bullets and explosives and tanks, whatever, airplane. It could be, pig lard. Who knows? It could be leather belts. Anything. Everything goes way up. Production and export, right? It could be wheat. Just, historically, that's been the case. Whenever there's a foreign war, right? All the boys go out to fight. Well, who picks up the supply? USA, right? It's major profit time. All right. Okay. So, who are the guys that cut here? Key people on the War Industries Board: Samuel Bush, father of Prescott Bush, father of George H.W. Bush, father of G. Right? Robert Lovett, key architect of the Cold War. All right, one of the founding partners of Brown Brothers Harriman Bank, right? And John Foster Dulles. All right, okay. All these guys, Bush, Harriman, Lovett, okay, Rockefeller, right? One of the Dulles. These guys are all partners of Brown Brothers Harriman Bank. Key bank, the largest private bank in the U.S. Why is that important? They don't have shareholders. That means they don't have to issue, reports, right? They don't have to say anything about where their money is, right? It's all kept on the lowdown. All right. Now, why was this bank? What was Bush Bank? This bank and Bush's bank, the Union Credit Corporation or something like that. Union Banking Corporation. Union Banking Corporation. Union. It's something. It's Union something. But anyways, Harriman's bank and Bush's bank both supported Hitler, the Nazi Party, and helped rebuild the Nazi war machine. Oh, that's just great, right? We end up fighting these dirtbags. right? So they play a role. I mean, I'm not saying how big, but they played a role in World War II, right? Uh, and here's the thing: after the war started, four Bush Harriman corporations, including banks and steel companies and mining companies, continued German operations until FDR shut them down in November of 1942. That's almost a full year after we're at war with Germany. This is our enemy, and they're still supporting our enemy. Well, how patriotic is that? Bunch of douchebags. All right. I say FDR related. FDR is a connected dude. He's related to 12 presidents. He's related to this Delano guy. These guys are connected. I mean, I like FDR because I think FDR was a guy who truly had noblesse oblige, right? You know, at least that from what I know of him, he is a decent guy. All right, he's my favorite president. All right, so here's Alan and John Foster Dulles, right? All right, nephews of Lansing. Lansing was a key guy that got us into World War One, right? They conduct the Iran coup, the Guatemala coup, Bay of Pigs invasion, right? All right, so I'm going to skip most of this, like Robert Lovett, right? How he's all connected to weapons industries and banking and so forth, right? How he's a mentor of McGeorge Bundy, who got us into the Vietnam War, wrote the plan to get us into the Vietnam War, right? Right, and how all these corporations are linked together through dresser industries, owned by Brown Brothers Harriman, run by Prescott Bush and Neil Mallon, all bonesmen, right? These guys are a power club, and how they get us into wars. Bush, first Gulf War. Now, I'm talking about Middle East here, so these are important. First Gulf War, War on Terror. The War on Terror is a direct outcome of the First Gulf War because if you look, and we'll look at bin Laden's motivations for attacking. Everything stems from stuff he was pissed off about that came from the First Gulf War, right? And then the second Bush takes an attack by Al Qaeda, uses it to attack Iraq. We had nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks, right? And everyone was suckered by that. I showed you how that was done. Americans were suckered by that. People are going to say, no, I wasn't. They all were fooled, right? I swear, I'm thinking just like I'm the only person, just about the only person in the U.S. who was saying, what are during the Cold War, what are you talking about the Soviet Union, right? There's a massive, big, scary threat, right? They're about to fall apart. They launched a major offensive war. I mean, defensive wars are entirely different. When they're their lives are on the line for survival. Oh, that's entirely different. But a major offensive war, unjustified, right? They're getting what has happened throughout Russian history, right? Mass desertions, revolutions in the country, breakaways, republics, right? What do you think is going to happen again? And and I can go on and on with the weaknesses within the country from multiple. There's 14 official languages in the Soviet Union. There's multiple religions. There's multiple national identities and aspirations. On multiple ethnicities, on and on, right? Um, and I'm saying they're about to fall apart. And you know what? I was proven correct. Now, same thing with this Gulf War. I'm about the only person out there. As soon as that first intelligence document was released, bing, my radar went up. I knew something's in play. Why? Because I did work on Vietnam War, and I knew how they used uh, leaking of intelligence reports to manipulate the people. It's not there to inform you. Oh, we're going to leak this to you so that we're going to inform. It's all there to manipulate you. That's why they're leaking it. Manufactured false intelligence report, right? And I knew that they're going to start a war, right? No one at this point knew it, right? And sure enough, they did. And I showed you how they manipulated that congressional resolution. And as soon as they got that, they got their hot little ticket to war. And what does that do? That creates ISIS. That destabilizes the Middle East, causes a lot of problems. But all these wars were big money makers, and more than just, you know, uh, 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 logistical, civilian LOGCAP, logistical civilian augmentation program, or private military, security contractor corporations, mercenary corporations. More than just that. We'll get to the many ways that war is profitable, right? So that's all I wanted to do. I figured that I gave a brief, basically exposure to this right here, very brief, and I figured, well, I know the liars are going to attack. They're gonna, they'll wait a day when everyone remembers nothing. All right, then they'll launch an attack and they'll say, this is all bogus, right? He's making this up. Well, I showed you actual word for word. You go back. Tell you what, I gave you the page citation numbers. Go back and look it all up. All right, this is printed. All this you get is public information now. It's declassified. All right. So I showed you exactly how they manufactured a coup, overthrew a government. They went through all this. Okay. All right. And they did it again, right, in Guatemala. Guatemala is the worst case. So we install a dictator in Iran, right? He's nasty. He has his secret police. They're brutal, right? Man, Guatemala, you could say it's even worse. Guatemala lived a nightmare for 40 years of dictators with massive genocidal crap, whacking villages, all right? It was bad, Guatemala, right? They took down democracy, installed brutal dictators. Why? To protect their money bags, right? So cheer USA. Go ahead. Yeah, USA. Oh, it's about Uncle Sam. It's about good versus evil. We're always good. Yeah. Why don't you open your eyes to a little bit of reality? Get a little reality. All right. So that's it for that lecture.